But let's talk anyways.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the. Are you going to go for every? Okay, good. I'll need that help. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October 16th study session. And let's get started. First thing up is Dr. Kent Pekel for Rochester Public Schools. Welcome.
Thank you. I assume here. Nice location. Thank you so much, council members, mayor. It's an honor to be here. I think all of you know that the idea of each of the administrators in our 3 jurisdictions visiting the elected bodies was born of some discussions that happened a little more than a year ago about a tri-government structure. And we all walked up to the edge of that large new commitment of time and organizational resources, and then took a few steps back and decided that rather than launching a new collaborative body, we would have each of us come and give a brief overview of some of the hot issues that our respective organizations are facing. And so we had Heidi with the school board a week or so ago, and Allison is coming tomorrow night to the school board, and I have the opportunity to give you a brief overview of some of the important things that are going on in Rochester Public Schools. I have my chair, Kathy Nathan, here to jump up and correct me if I miss anything. And I'm only going to be doing that from one graphic, which is up there on the screen, and I think all of you have there. These are the 15 building blocks that encompass the strategy for Rochester Public Schools for the next at least 3 years. And I will say, taken together, this is a very ambitious agenda to raise the achievement of all students, and in particular accelerating the achievement of our students who are furthest behind. I think taken together, it holds the promise of helping Rochester Public Schools become one of the highest performing diverse school districts in the state, if not the country. But we have a lot of work to do between now and then. The problem with this graphic is that it makes it look like everything is equally important and everything's happening at once. And I will assure you that that's not the case. It's a 3-year plan with things rolling out in waves. But for the sake of simplicity, I'll just hit a few of the big issues, which I think touch off some of the things that you may be hearing about from constituents or that may overlay with issues that you're working on here at the city. If you look at the top, at the heap of the Legos or the Duplos or Diplos, I always forget how to say it because my kids are in college or grown, but the building blocks is deeper learning. And this is a strategy that really is the change work in our school district right now. We have a team of teachers in every one of our schools and our early childhood programs really attempting to lean into what does deeper learning mean in practice in the classroom and throughout our schools. And we have embraced a framework that grew out of research that was conducted at Harvard that really tried to unpack those learning experiences that probably are where all of us fell in love with whatever we actually ultimately decided we were most interested in, both in school and in our careers. And that is really a 3-legged stool of mastery, identity, and creativity. That we were truly grounded in the core concepts, the foundational skills. We weren't just going through process. We had real mastery of the academic knowledge and skill that was before us. But it didn't stop there. It moved then into identity, where we made personal connections to that academic content, and it influenced who we saw ourselves in the future. And then finally, creativity. We applied what we learned to solve problems and to make new things. So that's the innovation part of the agenda. This year, we're working to define and bring that framework to life. Next year, we're working to actually measure it and look at connection to academic outcomes. And we're doing that with a major grant from a private foundation that has been quite supportive of our work in the 2 years since I've been here. If you go down to the next level, there are 2 foundational supports for deeper learning that we are also investing in at system-wide scale across the district. And the first is implementing what in our education field, our EduSpeak, we called MTSS, or a multi-tiered system of supports. This is a pretty common sense idea that actually is not so simple to implement. And the core idea is that in every subject area in every school, there should be a pyramid. And at the base of that pyramid, 85% or so of the students should be able to get what they need academically in their core classroom instruction, what we might call that tier 1. And we have some big gaps there to fill in, but we're doing that work. But we know that not every kid's needs are going to be fully met in that tier 1. And so on top of that pyramid is a tier 2, where those students are in the classroom, they're fully a part of that classroom community, but they're receiving targeted support, whether that's through small group tutoring or through technology or other interventions. And then at the top of that pyramid are 5% of our kids who we know need intensive supports to succeed. We are building out our MTSS work with the technical assistants from the University of Minnesota, and we're starting it first on literacy. And as many of you may know, in the last 20, arguably 30 years in American education, we have had something called the reading wars. And the reading wars have been between what sometimes has been called phonics and whole language. I will tell you, in Rochester, the reading wars are over. And we're bringing phonics back systematically across all of our schools, but we're doing it through what we're calling structured literacy and what sometimes is called the science of reading. It's a fundamental shift in how our teachers are actually helping kids learn to read. And a lot of the heaviest lifting is with middle and high school students who, for many different reasons, didn't get some of those foundational skills in elementary school. But we know that if we don't accelerate their reading instruction, you can't shift from learning to read to reading to learn. So multi-tiered systems of support is work that's happening in every school and program across the district, and we're also upgrading and expanding our mental health supports for students. We did a system-wide review over the last year of mental health. We found some real strengths in Rochester, but also some real gaps. For instance, we do not have any universal screening tools that we use to proactively identify students who are struggling with mental health. And so too often we're reacting when the crisis or the challenge erupts, whereas we want to put in place proactive strategies. The work we have done to date would suggest that the two largest challenges our students face are anxiety and depression, and that there are a significant number of our students who have had suicidal thoughts, with suicidal ideation. It's not at all the majority of our students, but the data does suggest that we have some kids who are really struggling, and Rochester, of course, is not unique in that area. Then you move down to that creating community strategy. We have, since I got here in summer of 2021, spent a lot of time on that first building block around belonging and behavior. We want all of our schools to be positive places where kids feel they can be and become their best self. But like every other school district in the United States today, especially coming out of the pandemic, there have been some challenges with behavior. And we have established that there are criteria for behavior in Rochester Public Schools and that students need to adhere to that. We also know we have discipline disparities between student groups that we have identified and are very committed to decrease. And so that maintains as very much a work in progress. Then you can see engaging parents and caregivers. We're adopting a process that really tries to leave behind the days of sending a notice home in the backpack and hoping that that was sufficient to help families understand what they could do to help their young people thrive. This year we'll be piloting an 8-week parent empowerment program where parents go to the school for 8 weeks together in a parent community, and they go through research on academic success, on supporting their students socially, emotionally, and they also get support for how to help their kids access the services and supports in those schools. So we'll be piloting that this year in our subset of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school, and then we hope expanding it across the district in the years ahead. If you move down to the next category of empowering our people there, you can see improving recruitment and retention. Really, in some ways, that name is a little too narrow. It really is about investing in our people. And I will tell you today, literally today, we had our first recruitment specialist in our human resource department start at least in recent memory in Rochester Public Schools. And I'll be honest, I was pretty floored at that. We have largely waited for good people to find us up to this point, and we're fortunate that thousands have. We have extraordinary staff, but we know in this labor market, we need to be very proactive in looking for the very best staff to come work in our district. And a particular priority for the years ahead is recruiting staff who have specialties that are in short supply, special education teachers being prominent among them, but also in other areas, and whose life experiences and backgrounds are reflective of our changing student body. And so that is going to be a critical priority. Next, you see developing leadership capacity. School principals talk about a tough job these days, and so we are investing very heavily in our school leaders. We are not only investing in the ones who are currently serving in our schools through a 1.5-year-long leadership development program, but also in investing in teachers and other staff who may want to become principals over time. And so that leadership development work is really going to be of preeminent importance, because really in the end, it's almost impossible, in my experience, to find a great school that doesn't have a great principal. It can happen, but it's rare. When you look at the next category of uplifting youth voice and leadership, that's work that is actually entering the design phase this year. But we really want to make sure that hearing our young people and building the leadership skills of our young people is a hallmark of everything that we're doing. And we're using the terms youth voice and youth leadership as related but distinct terms. With youth voice, we mean kids have a way to make their experiences and their perceptions of their schools known, whether it's through surveys or focus groups or interviews or informal conversations. With leadership, we're investing in the leaders of today and tomorrow. The leaders have followers, and we're building the capacity of young people to actually make change and move things forward within our schools and within our community. And then finally, in that empowering people category, the building post-secondary and career pathways. When we did the year-long outreach that led to this strategic plan, there were certain constituencies who had certain priorities. And of course, almost every one of these building blocks had that behind it. From our parents and other caregivers, especially in our high schools, a screaming need was to have much enhanced support for helping kids figure out what they want to do and be after high school. And we're taking a very holistic approach to that, so it's not just a four-year college by any means. Careers, post-secondary and technical education, but we also know high school's too late. And so the strategy will begin in elementary schools with helping our little kids understand their likes, their dislikes, their interests. In middle school, helping them understand the world in which they're going to live their lives. It's a hard reality that all of us out here in the real economy understand, but I'll tell you, there's not a lot of sixth graders who understand that what you can learn will determine what you can earn more than ever before throughout their lifetimes. And so helping them understand the connection between education and life opportunity. And then by high school, really making sure we're giving them a diverse exposure to an array of fields. One of the things I've said about Rochester, which is one of the things that I love being here, is that I've worked in a lot of communities in my previous two jobs, which was at the University of Minnesota and then as president of a research organization, where I was working with schools or even post-secondary institutions where investing in educational improvement often had a tension, which was that in those communities, people feared the jobs were not there and they were preparing kids to move away. Who succeeded in their schools. And in some places, that was the objective reality. That's not our challenge in Rochester. The jobs will be here. The question is, can a kid born in any zip code in this city or who moves here from Chicago or Mogadishu get the education they need to access the opportunity that we know will be here? So that post-secondary and career pathways piece is really important, and it's been a really good point of partnership both with our business community and our higher education community. And then finally, there's a bunch of systems that we need to shift to make all of this work. We are in the midst right now of taking a very hard look at our funding formulas, the revenue stream that makes possible educating all kids. We are looking at the areas in which we have discretion and how do we make sure we're using dollars where the need is greatest. We also are very interested in putting more decision-making authority and flexibility at the school level. We're 27 programs and 18,000 kids, and if you've been to Riverside versus Falwell versus Gage versus Gibbs, you know that our schools are stunningly different. And yet we fund and staff them pretty similarly right now. And so we want to account for more decision-making authority within a system of parameters and expectations. That's work that the school board will begin to get some recommendations on this spring. We've completely shifted our school improvement process to focus on data and metrics and outcomes. And I'm pleased to say we received a recent grant from the state of Minnesota and actually have just hired our first coordinator of project management in Rochester Public Schools, which is not particularly sexy or exciting, but I will tell you it is a gap that my field of education has as a gigantic hole, which is how do we actually implement initiatives with timelines and fidelity and flowcharts, the kind of thing that friends at Mayo Clinic tell me there are literally hundreds of people who do there, and we're going to have one. But we're going to build the capacity to make sure that we're executing on this strategy in a careful way. The school board has launched a process to review all of the policies that govern our work for equity, and in practical terms, that means making sure our policies work for the families and kids who face the greatest challenges to academic success. We are thick in the guts of redesigning our transportation routes. We currently have school start times that do not work for a large share of our families. When I got here, our elementary schools started at 9:35, and symbolically we moved them to 9:25. But the 9 to 5 job still does exist. It's not just a relic of the past, and that is far too late for a lot of working families at the elementary level. It also is too late for our youngest learners who wake up ready to learn, and at that start time by the end of the day, they're really dragging. To fix that, we don't want to put the high school kids back at the crack of dawn, because that does not fit with the teenage biology or life experience either. So our school board has approved much better start times, with elementary schools starting around 8 a.m. Starting next year. But in a school district of 218 square miles, and at a time when our transportation bid for next year came in at a 15% increase, we are having to rethink the whole map of attendance areas and transportation services, and that will culminate in some decisions, recommendations, and I hope decisions at the school board level starting in December. And then finally, working to increase philanthropic support. We have had some good success in the last couple of years. I think Rochester Public Schools is really uniquely well positioned to be an engine of innovation and reform, and funders like that. And so we had, some of you probably saw the U.S. Secretary of Education here at John Marshall High School a few weeks ago. In addition to generally wanting to acknowledge the good work that's happening in Rochester, he wanted to acknowledge a new federal grant that we received. For every year for the next 5 years, we're partnering with Winona State University to help 5 people who are already in our district as education support professionals or staff or teachers get their license as clinical social workers who can provide mental health services in our schools. And so at the end of that grant, which we will sustain from our funding at the end, we'll have 30 new people providing mental health supports for our students who already know our students and who are already here in Rochester. So that's one of those kinds of examples of how the philanthropic funding can provide us with the innovation resources that we need to kind of move it forward. So as I said, this is not all happening at once. It's happening in waves and pieces, and I'm glad to kind of take any thoughts or observations. It was great to have a chance for the school board to get a glimpse of the work that the county has been doing, and I know we'll have the same tomorrow night with the city. And I'm really glad to have had this opportunity to give you what was hopefully not too quick of a turbo tour through our agenda in Rochester. And I'm glad to connect with any of you. I've done it with many of you, but not all of you individually. It's been a whirlwind of 2 years, and I haven't had the chance to do as much of that as I hope to do, as get my head above water a little bit in the years ahead.
Wow, thank you so much. There are huge changes coming to RPS, and they sound like they are really well thought out and actually deserved, needed. So thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions here. Councilmember Wall and then Bransford.
Thank you. I really appreciate your focused and energetic leadership for the last couple of years, Dr. Pekel. It's no secret that school systems have been forced to provide many more services outside the traditional classroom over years, many years, decades, but it increases. Whether that's through state mandate or through simply seeing and meeting needs of community members. Where is it that you and the school board might see a greater need for partnership with city, county, even the state in trying to relieve what I consider to be just really overwhelming pressures on school systems?
I've already mentioned mental health. That's a huge opportunity. The other would be housing. Housing, stability. We've had some really good success with some county-funded positions to work in our schools as housing navigators to help people connect to housing. We have just added an additional pilot position focused on eviction stability, and so that is a huge area for collaboration. Another one that that I think is important to talk about cautiously and carefully, but is also urgently should be on our shared agenda, and that is our young people who are getting caught up in the juvenile justice system. And finding both supports for those young people and meaningful accountability, both to keep them and others safe, is a very urgent priority. We know that sending a young person who has been involved in criminal activity to Dakota County, for example, where they might be able to get a bed for a number of days is certainly one option, but there are many, many challenges with that. You take an officer off the street for a number of hours, and we have a young person who's not in our community. That's obviously, that's when we know criminal activity or at least an arrest has happened. There's other kids who are caught up in a continuum before that happens, but who do need our support. And I think that is an area of potential collaboration between the city, the county, and the school district that, that as I say, we do need to bite off, but I think we need to do it, cautiously and be sure that we are taking a strengths-based approach to those young people who we want in our community, we want to support, but who we do need to recognize are getting involved in some things that are problematic for them and for our schools and others. And so that would be, in addition to that, mental health and housing, that'd be another area that I would think could be good for collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that overview. Something occurred to me while I was sitting here, and it has to do with collaboration as well and building partnerships. So this is really a special education focus. So one thing is kudos for having Friedel a space for special ed because they deserve it. It was kind of spread out or in small, so I from an equity position, I love that they have their own space. The people that are in special ed are rock stars, at least from a rail perspective, post 12th grade. So the thought that I have is in terms of partnerships, and this isn't really a question, it's more of a comment or a little bit of spitballing, but students that age out of rail at about, say, 21 or 22 hit this big cliff in programming between 22 and 30. There's ABC, there's possibilities, there's another group coming online, wait lists are really long, and so what happens is you get out of rail and then you have a child sitting at home because there's not enough capacity. But a lot of what funds those, the rail possibilities, ABC, are county and state funding grants. It would be interesting to explore some kind of a collaboration for students that don't have day programming once they're out of rail, because the funding is there. Now, the staffing may not be, but there is a real opportunity for helping families with kids who are not in day programming but really need it, to see if there's a model there that can be useful, like expanding rail by another year if they're on a wait list and can't get in. So just a little outside of the box thinking, because the funding is there. It's not like RPS would necessarily have to pony up all the money, because with those grants and waivers, there's a pot of money that each family has. They can go, here, right? Here's some funding. Now they would need to maybe, so just a thought in terms of expanding partnerships with the county and the state in order to provide a little bit more of a runway for students that have aged out, don't have day programming until they can get in. So just a thought.
I will say, I appreciate that. It's very timely because I think it's another good example of something we could not do on our own that we would be very eager to work in partnership and thinking about. We also do need to make a long-term decision about what to do with the old Friedel building, and I'll be bringing some recommendations in the fairly near future to the school board about that. I would agree that that has been a step forward for rail, and we want to continue to build on that progress. And so the idea of a larger space to serve more students could be very timely as we think about the next phase of space for that programming. I also haven't made a recommendation to Kathy and her colleagues yet, but I said it at the school the other day, and I'll say it here. I think it is a moral imperative to get our Phoenix Setting 4 students into a new facility as well. One that is reflective of the kind of amazing programming that they also do there. And so we have a series of facilities decisions for our students with special needs that we'll be thinking hard about in the next 6 months. So it's a great time to have that discussion about maybe somewhat expanding the footprint that we have for rail, wherever it might be. And it might be there, but we have some issues to work through there. So very timely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Dennis. All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, it's no surprise I'm a groupie of the school district, having been a high school science teacher and working later in life at RPS in
Yeah.
Riverside and Gage and Hoover. I'm sorry, forget all the places I worked at in the school district. Big fan. And I think, well, I applied, I was thinking about being a school board, running for school board, but you can't be an employee of the school district.
Right.
So, all that. What I think, so we forget, because obviously kids don't vote and they, they're not active in the process. But what's good for kids is in 50 years, 100 years, it's good for Rochester. So like we need to really invest in the tri-government. I'm saddened by the not implementation of that program. But I do want to, I have a couple just moments. I just want to say a shout out that you did a wonderful job on the panel. I have the cradle to career when you bringing schools together and talking about the need for connection. And when I see the start times, having 3 children of my own and 3 separate public schools with 3 different start times, it's nice to have that more unified. But it does impact after school issues. And I've heard from a lot of people, I'm a talker, I'm going around talking to people, and they said, oh my goodness, we don't have childcare now. If we're going to have elementary start early, that can ripple into crime. I'm not saying that, kids in elementary school, but there is that latchkey kind of situation where kids will come home where parents are still working. So that's a huge city issue too. I mean, mental health and all the things that you've covered are huge city issues, transportation and safety and housing. So my first question, I have a couple, is that aspect. Has that been addressed on what's going to happen? And of course, this is the child care study that was on October 4th brought to people at that Cradle to Career event. They're looking at how that's going to collaborate with the city after school to help prevent kids from being home alone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Councilmember Dennis. There's two broad strands that I heard in your comment. One on the before and after school care, what we call school-age child care, or SAC. We urgently need to expand the availability of SAC, and part of it is financial and part of it is staffing, finding ways, but of course those two are linked. And one of the things that we have very recently begun to look at is that while we have kept the cost of our school-age child care quite modest, we may have been actually sacrificing an opportunity to charge more to families who can pay it, allowing us to thereby significantly expand the number of slots we can serve while keeping the fees low for families who, for instance, qualify for free and reduced price lunch. And so potentially significantly increasing fees, thereby increasing salaries for staff, and thereby increasing the number of slots is something we've very recently begun to look at in terms of the school-age childcare piece. We have to make sure, of course, we don't price ourselves out of the market. But I tell you, I have a lot of parents who say, I would pay more. I need the before and after school care because of my job. And so that's something we very recently started to look at. On the early childhood programming front, similarly, another area in which on the cusp of a lot of change, our child care programming, early childhood, is not located where our families are who need it the most. And up to now, we have been seeing that mostly as a transportation challenge, which we mostly meet through vans. Vans are very expensive and hard to staff. So we have very recently started to think about, do we actually need to relocate some of our early childhood programming so that it's closer to the families who could benefit most from it, particularly low-income families? That obviously is not a next month possibility, but I also don't think it's a 5 years from now possibility. If you've ever been to our Mighty Oaks facility, it's kind of like going out into the cornfields, and that is not where our families are that most immediately might benefit from that programming. So no decision there. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. We're not talking about doing less. We're talking about doing more. But are we located where the families can benefit the most? We're not giving up on the transportation piece, and certainly we want to continue to talk with the city and the county about that. But frankly, given that little kids are not a simple thing to transport, it's probably a more promising strategy to think about relocating programming than to have more of them going across the city on a van. So definitely both urgent, really important priorities. Thank you for flagging them.
My other quick question, kind of just right on that in transportation. So I didn't go to the National League of Cities this spring because we got our funding a little bit cut down, so wasn't able to go to both national leagues. But the one I went to last year, we talked about a partnership with the schools, the cities, with after school programs. There's a partnership with many cities in the nation where they use bus services of the city to partner with the school buses, of course, when there's, and you can imagine with my kids, you get those calls, I'm sorry, we don't have bus drivers. I'm sorry, your bus is late. I'm sorry. So I can't even fathom people who have, going, all of those people who are impacted by the lack of transportation. Has there been discussion? I've toyed a little bit with this, but across the nation, there is a lot of really strong partnerships with the schools and the cities, even like with playgrounds. Like I'm on the PTA, so we're talking about the playground needing equipment. I'm like, well, isn't it kind of like a city park, right? Because I mean, my kids use it as a city park in the summer. I mean, so I'm kind of throwing ideas out there. Has there been real collaboration on the parks to look at maybe helping fund some of the playground equipment, helping the bus services, helping to pick up the slack, and then of course after school programs that could really help with crime prevention, and then of course all the incredible needs for mental health and everything that the children are struggling with.
Yeah, I think the one area of the ones you mentioned where we have begun to lay some groundwork for collaboration with the city is transportation. And City Administrator Zelms pulled the city team together, and I brought the RPS team together in August, and we're meeting again later this month to look at not just long-range planning, but medium-term planning, so that we're looking at where the city's transit planning and our redesign, which is now much further along than when we briefed them on where we were in August, might converge. And so absolutely, that's probably more likely with older kids than it is with younger kids, but we don't have that many older kids. We have some going to our PTEC and CTEC programs who are taking city buses. That is definitely an area for possible increase. And another virtue is that is not then doesn't bind us into the traditional school day time-wise. We can actually have kids going at different times, which meets a flexibility need. I think on the playground front and the other things you mentioned, those are not necessarily things that we've started to talk about collaboratively, but we'd be eager to do those things as well. But definitely the things are in motion on the transit front for sure.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving here. We've got Councilmember Keene and then Palmer.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm glad you're here today. It's good to get a connection. And I appreciate the way you came with the structured blocks. I think it does help put things into perspective. It also kind of like pigeonholes some things. And of course, a lot of things go across these different boxes. The one that jumped out at me was the redesigned transportation routes. And I've been close to this and how complicated it can be. We didn't talk, though, about the number of programs that are offered through Independent School District 535, the 4515s, and the values-based, or these other things, which is then a complexity into the whole transportation, a major complexity into that. And then you've got the engaging parents. And so did you have any sort of like comment on how you sort of like separate these and say, like, in order to streamline our transportation, we're going to need to offer less, or in order to keep our parents like offerings that they need for their kids, we need to make this more complicated. Is there any sort of trade-off that you're starting to lean towards to say, this is how we have to go into the future?
Yes, and we have, you may have heard, a referendum on the ballot right now that is a focus of seeking to generate additional revenue, and in that case, it would go for technology. Soon after that vote on November 7th, I will be making a recommendation to the school board on precisely these issues, and I think you've captured it well. We are, like I know you are in the city, trying to do more with finite resources. Since I've been here, we've cut $21 million and 150 positions to put RPS on the path to being a financially sustainable school district. There are choices that are in that, and so we will need to be making those explanations to our community starting at the end of this calendar year, for sure. We have not tried to be coy or vague about it. As you know, there are so many moving pieces to this. Just 2 weeks ago, we got our bid from First Student, who is our bus contractor, and that came in at a 15% increase, taking us from about $10 million a year to $13 million a year in transit costs. That obviously now has to be factored into that redesign that we're taking a look at with that complexity. I will say my goal in making recommendations to the school board about this is to preserve as many of the wonderful things in Rochester Public Schools as we can while creating a system that is more sustainable for the long term. which is both financially sustainable, but it's also understandable. If the system is so complex, I will tell you, we brought in an external firm last spring to do a complete scrub of our transit routes. And they said, A, you have amazing people who plan your routes and run your routes, and we've hardly ever seen anything as complex as Rochester. We have little kids in this city getting off a bus on an hour-long bus ride to change buses and get on another bus like you're going to the Delta Hub in Detroit, but it's every morning and afternoon in Rochester. And our team does an amazing job of making that work, but it is extremely complex to make that work, and it's not cost-effective to make that work. We're very efficient, but the cost drivers are not how our transportation staff plans to put kids on the buses. They're the options we make available to some of our families. So that is exactly there. And one of the things I say, we're having good but also adventurous negotiations with our teachers union right now, the Rochester Education Association, and I'm sure that we will come to a good conclusion eventually on that too. And I say, look, in my world, I almost never, like maybe once every 6 months, I get a simple decision between right and wrong. Almost everything is between right and right. It's all choices between good options and what can we do and what moves us forward the most. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also somewhat anxious that people will continue to understand that we have to balance those priorities in a way that moves the whole system forward, but hopefully does it in a way that preserves the things that are really good about our schools and our system.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad to hear they're on your horizon, and I commend your board and your leadership team for tackling them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being out in the community. It's well appreciated, and thank you again for your help with the pilot on the gyms. That was a nice project for us. And the only other thing I'll say is I had 3 kids go through this Rochester School District, 2 of them in special needs, and they were well prepared, and I appreciate everything that the school district did for my kids. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question, maybe more of a comment. I very much appreciated how you're looking at maybe some alternative models or places for teaching. I often feel that when you mentioned one of the biggest issues with the juvenile legal issues that are happening and some of the problems that some of our students get into, I often think those youth, those students actually are some of our brightest and our best humans, and they're just not being given an option that works with who they are. So as you go down this path of alternative learning, conventional learning, Gardner, Waldorf, Montessori, whatever it is that you're going to put here and there throughout our district, I'm hoping that more of our students will thrive. So thank you for taking an alternative view to that. I'm looking forward to where that goes.
Thank you. You're absolutely right that we have that. I'll just say by way of sharing the point that you made, I was at the John Marshall Century football game, and I got into a 45-minute conversation with a middle school student. The kid was so engaging and interesting. He began the conversation with, "I Googled your salary." And I know what we make. And it was up from there, And I finish it, and one of our administrators comes over and said, "Well, we just moved him to another school because he was struggling with behavior in his previous school. This kid, he could be sitting in any one of your places. He was absolutely that. His mind is moving like that. And he took for 45 minutes, and he knew all kinds of things about school, district stuff and everything. It was quite extraordinary. We did a project last year that we called the Perspectives Project, and we asked our kids who were struggling with either behavior or academics or both. And there's a lot in there, a ton. It's on our website. But one of the things was, does the learning engage me? Does it actually connect with me? And that when that's happening, our behavior challenges are not entirely gone, because these are still young people who are pushing some boundaries, but they're very different. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's great. I know that you can take an EBD leveled setting or an OD leveled setting and just teach to the child, and all of a sudden you've removed a lot of barriers. So thank you. And our last question, Mayor Norton.
Yeah, I wanted to first thank you for your presentation today. Takes me back a few years, and I want to also thank you for your partnerships on a number of topics over the last, since you've been here and I've been here. I appreciate having the open door and the dialogue at all times. I appreciate our meetings, and I'm not sure everybody knows, but we do continue to meet with the council president and the county and the city, continue to meet administrators, but also elected officials periodically get together. And I found that very beneficial and helpful. So I wanted to say thank you for those partnerships. Also wanted to ask a question. One of the things that's been touched on in a number of different ways here with students with challenging behavior, unfortunately we've had some headlines of students recently who've gotten in trouble with the law. And I see on here, again, what goes around comes around, engaging parents and caregivers. I wrote the parent involvement, hopefully it's been redone since I did it back in the early 2000s. The parent involvement policy for the school district. And I really wonder if you can tell me, it's not just an issue with students having challenging behavior. There's sometimes familial issues, communication issues. There's lots of things going on here. And I wonder if you can tell me how you're going to engage with parents as well, because nonprofits and the police are not the solution. It's deeper than that. And I was thrilled to hear that you might have a grant for the social workers, or you do have a grant for the social workers. Maybe that's part of the answer here, but I'm wondering how you're going to engage parents in order to best support the students in their success.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marion, for your partnerships on so many fronts. In addition to the Parent Empowerment Program, which I mentioned, which we know is just going to reach the kind of parent who wants to come and be in a school for 8 weeks with other parents to learn. So that's going to be very valuable, but it's not everybody. We're also adopting a framework that comes out of a lot of research that really is about helping, first, teachers, but of course not just teachers, principals and others, really rethink family engagement as a two-way street. And not just in terms of communication, but in terms of understanding from those parents and caregivers what they see in their kids, which might sound like a no-brainer, but I can't tell you as a teacher how many times I did parent-teacher conferences and I did all the talking. What do they know about their kids? And then the dual capacity is how do we help them understand what they can do that would be beneficial to their students? One of the things in the Parent Empowerment Program that we're going to be launching, which we will invite you to, it culminates with a graduation ceremony, and usually we've done robes. It's a modification of something that came out of California 25 years ago that we're adapting for Rochester. Invariably, parents, especially the kind of parents who self-identify as interested in that additional support, they say, nobody told me this stuff. Like, I did not have anybody explaining to me these things I could be doing or how school works. Sometimes they're new to the country. Sometimes their family's been here for generations, and nobody kind of gave them the way to access those things. And so it's really about building that capacity in the home and in school in both directions to work on that score. So we're trying to build on the policy work you laid the foundation for a while ago, and we'll keep working at it. It'll be fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, quickly, please. I know we're rushing through important things to get to more important things, so I know overly packed situations, but I wanted to say, like the PAIR, I just wanted to plug for PAIR, having been a huge PAIR parent, that with education and things like that.
Yep.
But there's a family engagement group and coordinator who I attend almost every month, and I just found out this past month that, Century and I believe Mayo, their parent, student, teacher associations have dissolved, and I guess I know this is not a lot of time for questions. Maybe we can touch base. I personally just want to say that I think that huge connection, especially with the death at Century this past weekend ago, and things that have really impacted mental health. The dissolving of the parent, teacher, student associations in those schools, I feel is tragic. And I know there's funding issues and there's different pots of money and things like that. But I just wanted to plug that. Early on, we have PAIR and things like that are wonderful. I was on the advisory council for 5 years of PAIR. I love it. But when you get up to the high school, when you really have people who are, having tragedies and mental health crises, that I would hope that somehow the school district and partner with the city and county, of course, mental health and all that, to keep those programs going with parent engagement.
I appreciate that. I just heard about that, and I certainly will look into that. I'll just say briefly, in many schools, not just in Rochester, the Parent-Teacher Association traditional approach has been very event-based, which is wonderful, planning fundraisers and things like that, whereas the broader family engagement might not necessarily involve an association like that, but it doesn't mean we won't be doing family engagement in those schools. But I agree, those are invaluable organizations, and so we'll take a look at what's happening there.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much,
Thank you
Dr.
very
Pekel.
much. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to our second item with the study session, we have Ms. Heidi Welsh here from Olmsted County. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Heidi Welsh, and I am the Olmsted County Administrator. I've been here in this role for about 6 years, and I'm so just honored to have the opportunity to come and talk to you. You know, I've got a few slides, and I know you're under a crunch, so I'm going to try to hustle. But before I even start there, I would like to just reflect on how far the relationship has come between the Rochester Council and the County Board. I think that is due to all of you, and especially I would call out the mayor and I see that she's not here, the council president, who have worked especially hard with commissioners. All of you have participated, of course, and to your wonderful administrator. I can't say enough about how wonderful it is to work with such a professional as Allison and her team. So I just want to start by thanking you there and reflecting on it really is different than it was 6 years ago. So thank you for that. I'm going to just run through a couple of slides here. Okay, you know, I told Rachel I should know how to use this since I'm in this boardroom too, but I'm really not as good as I should be. So, starting with, what do these things have in common? A herd of bison, burying the indigent, an underground water lab, and passport renewals. I think you got where I'm going, right? It's all part of the county's many responsibilities. So just a little bit of a backup to talk about the county. Just, you know, it's almost like the county level of government. When somebody doesn't know where else to shove it, stick it with the county. So we end up with a lot of things that are not necessarily totally related, from weed inspectors to elections. And I won't go through all those. You know them quite well. About the county, just quickly, you already know we have 163,000 people in this county, about 1,300 employees. There you see, I need to update to 125 million is our preliminary levy. Our overall budget, I think this year is going to be oh boy, now I'm going to tax myself, almost 350 million. That includes the non-levy as well. 8 cities, of course, not just Rochester is our main partner, and oftentimes we in this community think about Rochester and Olmsted as one thing, and Allison and I sometimes think, well, that'd be good. We could share an office. We'd do just fine. But there are actually other smaller cities in the townships, and that dictates some different things that the county ends up working with. So just a few things to talk about, a little bit about what we've been up to this year. Of course, we have 4 new commissioners. You know how this is. When you get lots of new people at once, it's a lot of onboarding, it's a lot of forming and storming, and you see that happening at the council this year. By and large, I think we feel quite lucky and happy with who the electorate sent us, and so we've been very busy with that piece. I'm going to talk to you about current hot topics. Our first one I just want to talk about is the housing continuum investments. Of course, you know we have the HRA, which isn't quite exactly an overlap with the county board, but the county board members all are on the HRA. We continue with a lot of investments in housing and in the HRA. Most recently, many of you have heard about what is called the Residents of Old Town Hall, or Roth, that is a property that we are hoping to turn into a housing stability center pending a grant that we have submitted to the state. So we'll see about that in December, but that would provide about 80 shelter beds and 45 other units of housing, yet to be determined whether they're single room occupancy or something else. Let's see. I'm just going to whip through these because I know you're short on time. Another thing that we work a lot on and we're really proud of right now is the work around soil and water protection. Big program that we have allocated, the board has allocated $3 million from the ARPA funds, the COVID funds, to do. This has been really successful, and it's encouraging farmers to plant short grain and other crops that really retain nitrogen so it doesn't leak down into the groundwater, which is pretty cool. Okay, another one is energy park visioning. Some of you, and certainly some of your staff, have been involved in this as well. There's a picture of waste to energy, which you know all the municipal waste goes to and turns it into steam and electricity. The picture on the left is the materials recovery facility, which we received money through the last legislature to start to build. I like to think of this as cleaning the garbage. Isn't that weird? But it pulls out way more of the recyclables, right? So we get more money returned for those recyclables, but also we extend the life of that plant because we're not sending as much through it, right? So really excited about that. And the board has been very busy, as you know. We have a couple of particularly strong advocates around the topics of energy and all sorts of environmental green activities. So they're really thinking about what's next, what comes after the materials recovery facility. Lots of ideas, lots of room to still be collaborating and thinking about it, but pretty exciting. Mental health, you heard this from Dr. Pekel too, but oh my gosh, and you all see it as well. Mental health is the name of the game. We have had so many increases, both in the number of people that we're seeing, both children and adults, but also the complexity of those individual cases. And I would call out the work that we're doing with social workers, riding along with law enforcement, both RPD and the sheriff's office. Everybody seems to be of one mind that it's working really well. And it's uncovering people who were otherwise unknown to the system, right? So it's adding to the front door of our mental health roles. And you don't want to just, when you found somebody in a crisis, you don't want to just drop them off and say, well, wait in line for a couple of months and then we'll get you into the system. No, so we've had to add quite a bit to our mental health staffing and our processes to try to make sure we're really there for the community in the way they need. Lots and lots of focus on this area for the county this past year especially. I just talked about, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I understand it's been fantastic from everybody, the police chief and the sheriff and all the social workers. Everybody feels like, oh my gosh, we should have done this years ago. So we're really pleased to have such a good and strong partnership around that and look forward to continuing this good work. Let's see. So topics on the horizon. Mental health care for youth, I talked about quite a bit, but even more going on this year. And Dr. Pekel talked about it in the schools. We do have a lot of this kind of focus in the schools, strong partnerships with our children and family services. We also have nurses, public health nurses out in the schools who take a mental health approach to some things as well. So lots of work going on there. A lot of increase, this is just sort of a, oh my gosh, watch this, put a pin in this one. Since the pandemic, remember how the roles for food support, for what we call MFIP, Minnesota Family Investment Program, which you might have known as welfare in many years gone past, all of that kind of aid went up. The roles went way up and healthcare went way up. They haven't come down. They haven't come down. So, part of it's about the eviction moratorium ending, but part of it may be that people are just in a rougher spot. So just keep your eye on that. We're very busy with that part of our work. Of course, we are partnered with you on things about and around the opioid crisis. You see it all the time, I'm sure, for RPD. Probably the fire department gets involved in a lot of that as well. And we're involved in various ways as well, trying to figure out how do we best serve people who are addicted. How, we get that end of it as well. So lots of work going on there. Oh boy, cannabis response. This is a big one for us, as I know it is for the city as well. Trying to get our arms around, what does it all mean? What do we need to do? For us, we're thinking more about what do we need to do in the townships, what happens in the small towns. We know that Rochester's got their hands on the part that, you got it under control, what's happening in the city, but in those other areas, what happens out there? And then there's the public health response, because of course public health doesn't want to just say, they still want to get the message out that this can be dangerous in different ways. They want to get that help. So all kinds of things. The county attorney's office is worried about I'm losing the word now, but trying to get rid of previous convictions. I just lost the word briefly. Expungement. Thank you. Expungement. I knew somebody would know. So a lot of work going on there, and you'll see us continuing on that. Oh boy. The Seneca property and Grand Park, you know, this is a saga. It really is. It continues. Lots of good work happening at Grand Park. We have money to go forward at the exhibition center now, so that is happening. But there remains this question, what do we do with that property formerly known as Seneca? The board has chosen to they can't come to an agreement right now, so what they agreed to was, let's just set it aside for a little bit and we'll come back to it. So I think there's a lot of room still in that topic for partnership should the city choose to want to join us in some ways in the future. Open space. We're working on an open space plan. I think this is long overdue. And I'm hoping, I mean, I really have, here's Paul in the back who I got to say hi to, but I really hope that we move towards, we've got a plan that makes sense from the city to the county. Think of the trails, or sometimes we think of them as linear parks, right? This is a little bit of a new world for the county, to be honest with you. The county just hasn't been that involved in trails and open space, but it should be. So we're moving in that direction and really looking forward to kind of leveraging the expertise of the city parks as we go. Election security, you know about this too, coming at us again next year. Of course, we got the elections now for the special elections, but we're really focused on next year and how to make sure that is as smooth and secure and transparent as we possibly can. It's a big deal, as you know. COVID still going on. Everybody probably knows somebody that's got it recently, but we're still tracking and paying attention to that in the public health department. Thank goodness, not as it was a few years ago, but still takes up a lot of our time. We're tackling this. You'll remember that the board asked 2 different volunteer bodies to study the topic of racism as a public health issue and to come back with recommendations. And they did. They came back with 42 recommendations, which you can imagine is a little bit daunting. But we're starting to work on some of those. Some of those recommendations are things that were right in line with what we were already planning to do or had already started. Some of them are new to us. So we are pushing forward on that, and it's pretty exciting stuff. The community will hear more about it. Yes, yet this year we'll be able to come back and report out on what progress we've made. We're working on improvements to the law enforcement training facilities. There wasn't any indoor space out there until now, and we're building now classroom space so that when law enforcement is, let's say they're training at the fire tower, but then there's a book or a classroom portion, they don't have to, head all the way to some other facility. They can do it out there. We're excited about that one. Where we did get, oh my gosh, we got it's almost $70 million to do this interchange out at 44 and 14. Everybody's excited about this. I'm mostly excited not to hear about it anymore, and to be honest with you. So this is underway, and this will start to form that second ring road around Rochester. This is one of the big pieces that we had to get through. There's just another map of changes going on with the highway system. Lake Zembro, we're doing a lot of park development up there. We don't have a huge park system, but we have 5 different properties, and the most recent one is up on Lake Zembro. There is a lodge, and we're doing some more work, a boat launch, sorry, I should have said it that way, and we're doing some redevelopment of that property to make it a little more family friendly. And then finally, we are launching, after a whole year, oh boy, it's been more than a year, of process, our strategic plan, which I'm really excited about. It's been a long time, and as you know, strategic plans are not everybody's cup of tea. It was not the previous board's cup of tea, but it is this board's cup of tea. So we have made a lot of progress, and I'm very happy that we'll have this document done to be able to share with the community. That's it. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. I know you're kind of crunched, so I won't take it as any sort of negative if you don't have questions or comments.
Thank you for breezing through that. And my apologies, Dr. Welsh. I had no idea you had earned a terminal degree. I've never seen that in front of your name, so thank you for presenting. We have Mr. Wall and Mr. Palmer.
Thanks. I've always enjoyed the associations I've had with the county. Very good people that are serving the citizens of Rochester and Olmsted County. You know, I've never seen anything official, but I've heard conversations. Can you tell us what the status is in terms of transitioning some services from this building, perhaps to the east side of town, or even the use of these chambers
Yes,
for
of
your
course.
meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the county, it's actually been about a decade of planning for the justice system. So when you think about the tower that we now call the government center, it will become the justice center. A lot more space needed for courts, and everybody may not be aware that counties are responsible to pay for all the facilities of district court. So we own and pay for all of the courtrooms, the judicial space, all of that is a county responsibility. Not always a welcome one. Let me just point out, because it's expensive, and there's not always agreement about between the bench and the board about how much should be spent. So we've spent about 10 years getting to the point of, okay, the judicial system continues to grow. We continue to get more judge time. In this district, we need more felony court space, and that has all been achieved up on the fifth and sixth floor of the tower. Then we are remodeling to make sure we finished another floor for other parts of the system, and the second and first floor are the last parts that will be changed to make more space. There'll be let's see, it's called a high volume courtroom that will go in over, I'm kind of pointing down towards where property records and licensing is now. There'll be more space for the Adult Detention Center, or ADC, the booking. There's a lot that's needed in the ADC, as you can imagine. So some of that space will be allocated for that purpose. Some for the folks who are riding along, we talked about before, the mental health workers who are riding along with our law enforcement, some space for that. So a lot of different things for the justice system. In order to make that happen, all the other internal functions need to move. So you are correct that the board, administration, all of our internal functions like technology and HR and finance, we will be moving out to campus. We were planning to build a new building out there, but because of the pandemic and the move to hybrid working, we realized, hold on, wait a minute, we think we can all fit in the footprint of what exists out there today. So and it was sort of one of those silver linings of the pandemic. That won't happen. I mean, it'll happen gradually because we have to modify those buildings. So starting this year, we're already building on to one of the buildings, which is named 2118. Really memorable, right? Anyway, we'll be moving those internal functions out as we remodel and shift people around. But we will be keeping the board meetings here in this room. We're really pleased with our partnership with the city. It doesn't really make any sense to build another facility like this, and we think it works just fine. So we will be traveling on Tuesdays when we come down to have board meetings. And it probably won't be a couple of years before that really is fully realized.
Mr. Palmer.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your help with the roundabout up the century and that partnership that we had with that. I think worked out really well. And I'm on the Housing Coalition, and I think it's a great partnership for us with the county, and I appreciate the work on that. So that's all I had for you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, the roundabout is near and dear to my heart as I'm a person who lives back there behind Century. Oh, it's so nice. Every time I go through, I think it's so much safer for people. And just a brilliant piece of collaboration between Councilmember Palmer, Commissioner Tyne, and the school district. It's a really good example of what we can do when we work together.
Thank you.
Ms. Dennis.
Thank you. So, again, I know time-wise, there's so many things, every single subject and topic I have questions on, so I would love to connect afterward. To echo a little bit off of the idea of the services downtown, we have lost a lot of services. We talked about the post office things, when we talk about downtown Rochester becoming more of a event than necessarily a destination. With the access for people to have to now travel, do you feel there's going to be I just feel there's going to be a huge barrier for people who came to get their birth certificate or whatever they're coming here for. They're downtown. Now they have to find transportation. How is that being addressed to make sure that the new location for your services has
Yeah, thanks for that question. We actually did some work about this ahead of time, and there are more people that complain about parking here than there are going to be people who maybe they're at Mayo for work, they're downtown for work, and they like to pop over to be able to get their driver's license renewed or so forth. But there are more people who actually say it's so difficult to park, whereas out at campus, it will be free parking and the parking won't be an issue for them. So I think there's a little bit of, yeah, some people are going to lose and some people are going to gain. And can you really, I mean, it feels a little bit of a 50-50. Yep, some people are going to be a lot happier. Some people will not be as happy because they'll have to get in a car or a bus and get out to campus.
Yeah, this was kind of one stop for a lot of people, and then, of course, busing and making sure that that is definitely an issue. My other one thing for time restraints, I'm going to just pick one of the many mental health I would want to talk more about as well, for sure. But the warming center, I saw the pictures on that, and we talked a little bit about the extreme crisis for people experiencing homelessness. This weekend, I sat across the street here on the cement for quite a while, over an hour, talking to people who have experienced homelessness this weekend, as I've done before in the past. And the last official council meeting, City Council shorted the warming center quite a bit of money. I didn't, but the council voted to give money that was going to be given to the warming center. Please correct me, 20,000 to other 25,000 to other organizations, which are wonderful organizations. How has that impacted the county, having the city take away that kind of funding?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. As I understand it, Mayo is going to fund that shortfall, and Catholic Charities will be able to continue just as we planned. And I would also add that I have thought about the fact that the city is offering to allow us to use Mr. Muffler, or that's how I refer to the building, Mr. Muffler, across the street. And so that is also sort of an in-kind contribution, right? The county owns the building across the street, the city owns Mr. Muffler, and so we both have an in-kind contribution in terms of facilities. Catholic Charities will provide that staffing for both, and Mayo has stepped in to help fund Catholic Charities with any shortfall that they might have. So I actually think we're in a good place.
And my last little still on this one subject of many subjects that I have questions on. I know they're looking at building a new facility. My experience sitting out there many times, but last night it was getting cold already, and I had a sweatshirt and jacket, and I was really cold, and I left after an hour because I I was cold, and people there were sitting for hours to get a bed, and they told me so many ideas, and I can share those later. About what they, but just having some kind of a warming situation outside for people who are waiting in line because it's only going to get colder. Like there's, I don't know, just a lot of ideas of that. Has that been looked at? Because many people wouldn't leave. They're like, we're going to freeze here because if we don't freeze here for the next 3 hours, we won't get a bed. Mm-hmm. If we don't get a bed, then we're on the streets. And it was just, I mean, it's so heartbreaking to see how people with many struggles, I mean, so many money poor, family poor, whatever the incredible tragedies in lives, to freeze on the cement, sitting there waiting. Has there been any talk about doing something just to help with those who are just waiting to get inside for a bed?
Well, I think that it will probably get better once we get to the point that overflow opens, because people won't be as worried about, do I need a bed or not, and they can stay at the landing longer or stay wherever they were before they got in line until they don't have to stand in line that long then, because they won't be as worried about, do they get a bed. So I think that overflow might be the answer to some of the things you're talking about.
I just want to just make it, I mean, on the record, it's a huge overlooked issue, as you have worked on with the county, I'm sure, but it's a city issue and it's a county issue, so, everyone, a humanity issue. So I appreciate your help in that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's keep moving with Mr. Keene, please.
Yes, hey, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. I think there are some people who do underappreciate all the breadth of the county thing, and I want to call out just on the environmental side when you talk about the investments with some of the things with the our groundwater improvements with water treatment and things like that. I was really impressed with that. I work closely with your, the materials recovery and some of the things we're trying to do with the MRF, but the one opportunity still on the horizon is if we get towards organic recycling, and that's something that I think the city would have to be involved with on how we would do a better job with that, and I hope we can be a good partnership in that. So thank you for for that specific part of your staff and the work they do.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I really look forward to where we go to in that topic too. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And then I just have a couple of final things. Hats off to the SWCD. I had a Bowser meeting this morning, grants and policy, and we funded Olmsted County with a lot of the funding for no-till, cover cropping, erosion, and we are the only county in the state doing something like that. So hats off to all the agriculture, good stuff that's going to retain our natural resources on the land. I appreciate that. And then just jumping off quickly off of Ms. Dennis's question, I've forgotten it.
That's okay. If you've forgotten it, if you do remember it, you can always send it to me, and I'm happy to chat with you about any topic.
Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you
Dr.
very
Welsh.
much.
We move on to Dave Beal with Walk a Mile in Their Shoes. I hope we have enough time for you, Mr. Beal.
I think that we do. And I believe that so if Mr. Beal would want to come forward, the presentation is up, and or if maybe Mr. Matzi would like to introduce the item.
Okay.
And the clicker is there.
Thanks. I don't have any slides actually, but I'll Dave here. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Norton and members of the council. Matzi, Active Transportation Coordinator. And just speaking to introduce the Walk a Mile in Their Shoes walk audit event that was granted to us from the AARP organization. So obviously just want to start by acknowledging the many groups that were just crucial in making this event happen. Dave and Family Services Rochester really carried this event, but then the support of Public Works and Parks teams, neighborhood leaders from the Sliderly Parks neighborhood, our neighbors, and so many others. And so I think by the time that Dave's presentation is over, you'll really get a sense that this wouldn't have been anywhere close to as successful without just all those key partnerships in our community. And so before I pass it over to Dave, I do want to define, what is a walk audit. So a walk audit is an activity in which participants evaluate the walking environment and identify issues that impact their comfort and safety. And so participants will essentially walk a route and will look for if and how pedestrians can travel safely along a street, how they can navigate an intersection, how people get from point A to B to C, and so on. And they're really multi-application and can be used as a community-wide engagement tool, as we did in this case, or conducted at one specific corridor with just a few key partners. And so I do want to address one maybe nagging question, and that's, but didn't City Public Works just spend all summer reconstructing sidewalk ramps in the Sliderly Park area? And you'd be correct in that. Tyler Spies, the project lead for the sidewalk improvement districts, was an essential member of the walk audit team. And during our planning process, we wrestled with that same question. But what we learned was that these two efforts, the sidewalk improvement districts and the walk audit sort of extravaganza, was that these two efforts are very much not a redundancy, but rather complementary to one another. So sidewalk sections and ramps reconstructed this summer were evaluated based on an engineering standard and a set of goals, and then rebuilt to adhere to that standard, whereas walk audits, they sort of broaden the scope and evaluates sort of the user experience, not just the infrastructure. So to a certain extent, we can simplify that nuance between these two efforts as one that collects quantitative data, so grade and slope, for example, and then another that looks at qualitative elements. So how does it feel to walk the street, and what are the influencing factors? And so as Dave will cover, our goal with this grant was pretty ambitious. Elsewhere in the U.S., walk audits were conducted along a single street or a few intersections with groups between 5 and 10 participants, but we wanted to cover as much of the Sliderly neighborhood as possible, including all the bordering arterials, connector streets, and the intersections, which meant that we needed to conduct anywhere from 12 to 15 simultaneous audits in one morning out to the 9th. And so I obviously won't spoil the specifics here, but the National AARP representative who participated in the event said that it was the largest group of participants that he had seen with a walk audit in his long career with the organization. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Dave.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Beal. I'm the age-friendly Olmsted County Coordinator at Family Service Rochester. I also serve as the Marketing and Communications Manager. I'm happy to be here this afternoon to talk with you about a walk audit that we conducted a few weeks ago in early September. I'm going to talk a little bit about age-friendly Olmsted County, though I presented to the council before on that effort. I know some of you are new. I'll be very brief and talk about that organization, but also I want to talk about it in terms of how the walk audit kind of fits into the work that we're doing. And then I'll talk a little bit less than I planned because Matt covered all the ground, but I'll talk a little bit about the walk audit, especially as it relates to older adults, and then share some of information about the event that we held and some next steps. But first I want to start with where you usually end at these presentations with a big thank you to the City of Rochester. You all were involved before we got started, really. Age-friendly Olmsted County sends out a roughly quarterly update talking about what we've been doing and what we're currently doing and what we plan to do. And in February I sent out an update where I just sort of mentioned in passing that we were going to apply for a grant from AARP to conduct a walk audit. At the time we thought it might be downtown. The next day I got an email from Council President Carlson and saying, "Are you going to involve the city in this?" I'm sure it was in a friendly voice. And I said, well, and the honest answer, though I was a little more articulate, I think, I said, well, yeah, but we hadn't figured that out yet. I mean, we just sort of got started thinking about applying for this grant. And so she copied that email, I believe, to the administrator and deputy city administrator. And the next day I got a nice email from the deputy city administrator, copied a little deeper into the organization, and pretty soon after that I was introduced to Matt. So you all got to be connected real quick, saved me a lot of footwork into who do I call, and goes into that. So the city was involved very early on, very supportive early on Matt's work, and he mentioned Tyler Spees and her work were very instrumental in helping us not only apply for the grant, because we wanted it in the grant to talk about how we were going to partner with the city, but also then once we were awarded the grant and planning and implementing the walk audit. So thank you for that. Let me start briefly with sort of a brief overview of age-friendly Olmsted County. Olmsted County joined what's called the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities in January of 2020. And when they joined, they asked if Family Service Rochester would serve as the lead agency, which we have been doing. As part of a membership in the network, you're asked to do a community assessment, which we completed in 2021, and then lay out a 3-year action plan based upon that assessment, which we published in September of 2022. And so we're coming into the first completion of the first year of that action plan. This year we were advocated at the state capitol for some revisions in the way the state funds aging in place services in a way that we thought would be more sustainable, and we're successful in doing that with a great support from our local legislative delegation. We have expanded caregiving and support and respite services in Olmsted County. We participated in the state digital and are participating in the state digital inclusion project. We conducted a couple of focus groups for the proposed sports and recreation center. We've long been involved in housing for older adults, and sometime at the first of the year, we're going to be launching an online Olmsted County guide to aging that we think will be a good addition to the work around here. Age-friendly Olmsted County is one of 21 network members in Minnesota, including the state of Minnesota, and the state of Minnesota is one of 11 states that have joined the network. There are 795 network members in the nation, including small towns, cities, counties, regions, territories, and states. And the network is part of the World Health Organization global network of age-friendly cities. So another instance in which Olmsted County and Rochester have connected with the planet in some way. As I mentioned, we did do a community assessment in 2021, a variety of surveys. We used information from other sources, including the city strategic plan and some research they had done around that, and then our own surveys and focus groups. And one of the issues that rose to the top in terms of our findings was that transportation of all kinds was a concern that touched many older adults. In the findings under a category called feeling safe, included in that category was safe sidewalks, where we reported that more than 98% of the age-friendly survey respondents and multiple focus group members noted the importance of having sidewalks in good repair. 1/3 of age-friendly survey respondents said Rochester does not have safe sidewalks. I don't know that that's true, that if you count it up, you'd get to 1/3, but certainly they were expressing a feeling, and that's something that we need to pay attention to if that's the impression that they had. Because of the importance of all kinds of transportation in the assessment, part of the action plan that we published a year later in 2022 touched upon this. We have 3 action areas, a third of which is to address is to provide for age-friendly community engagement. And one of the goals is to address age-based barriers to opportunity and access to ensure that built environments are safe and accessible. And part of one of the activities that we proposed engaging in was to promote and support walk audits of neighborhoods and business districts. And so the walk audit we conducted is part of the action plan that we're currently implementing. The county administrator mentioned some cannabis response, and some of you may recognize this. I couldn't resist this character from long ago. I blocked out to keep on trucking, but you may recognize him from that. Anyway, I want to acknowledge that for copyright and all kinds of issues. Matt has defined walk audit, and I chose a definition from the Minnesota Department of Health Services. I chose that because they also include that a walk audit can be used as a form of community engagement. That's sort of what I want to focus on this afternoon, is adding the walk audit, and our plans are underway to do so as one of the ways in which the city engages with the community and gets input. A walk audit is a type of what's generally sometimes referred to as participatory research, where in conducting the research, you do it with and by the people that you're trying to find information about, rather than to and for them. And so the city's pretty familiar with that, and sometimes called peer research, sometimes called co-production, sometimes called co-research, and locally we call it co-design. So this is an approach to community engagement and knowledge production that the city has been familiar with. It's been part of the age-friendly community-based research for nearly a decade. One of the reasons Family Service Rochester became interested in the co-design work was that we had come across this kind of approach as we were looking at what was being done around research for age-friendly communities and older adults. And so when we conducted the walk audit, we wanted to conduct it in a way that we thought could be replicated in other neighborhoods, and the goal was to empower the community to take an active role in shaping their neighborhood's pedestrian infrastructure and fostering a sense of partnership and pride, leading to sustained efforts in maintaining and improving walkability. So one of the things that we treated this walk audit as also as a pilot project. We wanted to gain information about the neighborhood, but we also wanted to sort of demonstrate the value of this approach in the work. Let me just add to what Matt shared about walk audits as having significant benefits for older adults. Some of the key advantages is that older adults often face challenges when navigating their communities. Walk audits can identify safety hazards such as uneven sidewalks, poorly marked crosswalks, or inadequate lighting, resulting in safer environments for seniors. Older adults may have mobility issues or require the use of mobility aids like wheelchairs or walkers. Walk audits can pinpoint areas where accessibility modifications are needed, such as curb cuts or ramps, making neighborhoods more age-friendly. Participating in walk audits fosters social engagement, a sense of community among older adults. It provides them an opportunity to connect with neighbors, share experiences, and collaborate on making positive changes in their surroundings. Walking is a low-impact exercise that can benefit older adults' physical and mental health. An age-friendly, pedestrian-friendly environment encourages older outdoor activity, reducing the risk of social isolation and improving overall well-being. Older adults are often marginalized in urban planning. Participating in walk audits empowers them to have a voice in shaping their communities, leading to better outcomes that reflect their needs and preferences. Walk audits can highlight transportation barriers and gaps in public transit, leading to improved transportation options for older adults who may rely on these services to remain independent. And finally, the collaborative nature of walk audits promotes co-generational collaboration and understanding, fostering a stronger sense of community and bridging generation gaps. Walk audits as a form of participatory research provides a platform for older adults to actively engage in shaping their living environments, resulting in safer, more accessible, and age-friendly neighborhoods that enhance the quality of their lives. There's a lot of good reasons to do a walk audit, and we did ours earlier this fall. As we mentioned, the walk audit was funded by an AARP challenge grant. We were one of 29 communities awarded this grant nationwide, and supported by America Walks, which is a national voice on walking and walkable communities. In fact, one of the staff members from America Walks, who's based up in the cities, participated in our walk audit this fall. His name is Ian Thomas. You'll see photos of him in a minute. Our planning team represented not only those of us who were involved in providing senior services, but it was important for us to include the city as a partner because of the impact we hope to have and participating in their engagement process, and also certainly members of the neighborhoods. I think we all appreciate the value that our neighbors brings to the city, and fostering these neighborhood associations, and that strong neighborhood associations is quite an asset. The fact that they exist in Rochester, and we certainly have those. And Slattery Park neighborhood is certainly one of the more active neighborhood associations. They do a lot. They bring people together all the time to mobilize them around doing something, and that's just what we needed. So Slattery Park was a good choice. Our neighbors, Renee, and our neighbors was a big help in helping us make those connections and providing support. She's got a lot of experience in working with neighborhoods, organizing these events. That was very helpful. And finally, then Tyler Spees and Matthew were just essential for us in terms of planning the audit and getting ready to conduct it. Our project started on June 30th. The grant deadline is to have your work completed by November 30th, but we wanted to set a walk audit when the weather was kind of nice still, and we thought some date after Labor Day, so we picked the weekend after Labor Day, and then prayed for a nice day, which we did have. Because we had so many people experienced in organizing these types of events, we didn't see a lot of challenges in doing that. It was still some work, but it came together pretty well. I've listed the team there for you. Our work was basically, once we decided on the date, to recruit the volunteers that we needed and the support that we needed from the community, to establish a route and organize staging areas. In the grant, we said we'd do 12 walk audits. I don't know why. We said 12. We needed a number. I said 12. So we did 12. And it worked out fine. And so we wanted 12 team leaders that we went out and recruited. And then we did sort of an open call for people to participate in the walk audits using the various networks that our participants were connected to. Though it was a walk audit that was targeted and reflected the needs of a neighborhood, Slattery Park, we wanted to have a broad participation because we were treating it as a pilot project, and we wanted a lot of people exposed to this activity with hopes that other people would take it up, and some are planning on doing so. The city, Matt and Tyler were this looks easy. It's one arrow. You go from one thing to the next. But basically, we had a neighborhood to try to walk around in. And so we had a lot of conversations. And this is a very good neighborhood to do a walk audit in. It's adjacent to downtown. People in this neighborhood walk, not just in terms of recreation. A lot of people in my neighborhood walk this. I do. My dog walks me. I'll go home and my dog will walk me when I get done here. And I go to the parks. But a lot of people walk around for recreational health purposes. People in Slattery Park also walk around as a mode of transportation. They go places. They get things done. They go to Cub Foods across the park. They go into the downtown. So it's a very good neighborhood to capture both of those common activities. And so the city helped us produce maps. And you can imagine how important maps are, not only on the day of the audit to know from where you start and where you end up, but also for us to kind of visualize what the event would look like and kind of target areas of the neighborhood that gave us some variety. Obviously, our goal was not to walk up and down every sidewalk, but where the common routes people take, and there's a lot of variety in Slattery Park in terms of where the walks are and what the streets are and how people get around. So once we got the maps, we were able to have that productive discussion about planning the routes. And we came up 12 teams, 12 routes. Tyler gave us 15. These routes were determined by the initial work that Tyler and Matt did in terms of their familiarity with the neighborhood from kind of their public works view. And then Kathy, who was the president of the Slattery Park Neighborhood Association, gave us an on-the-ground thing, and changes were made based upon her experience. I think the reason we did the walk through Slattery Park was because, people, that's how people get to Cub Food. They walk through Slattery Park. They don't go down the main artery there. And so we made adjustments based upon her comments and experience with the community. Came up with 12 routes. Roughly 1 mile. So when I'd say walk a mile in their shoes, I wasn't kidding. They were some were a little under, some were a little over, but they were roughly a mile. Each route took about an hour to complete. The team leaders, I list them there, are very important to the effort. We have representation from a lot of different organizations in town. The team members didn't necessarily join on behalf of or representing those organizations, but part of their interest was in the work they did. They were interested in transit or in older adults and transit. And so we have a pretty good representation, and it's kind of a core team that's holding together as we continue to talk about continuing this work. So each team took a route. Our initial plan was to have 12 teams of somewhere between 3 to 5 people plus the team leaders. So when we were recruiting, our targets were anywhere from 36 to 60 volunteers. We ended up with close to 80 people registering. And on the day of the event, we had 76 participants. I say 74 later, but I forgot the 2 shuttle drivers we had. So we had 74 participants. So on the day of the event, it went something like this. The Redeemer Lutheran Church said, yes, you can use our parking lot as a staging area. So we gathered all the volunteers there. They were assigned and divided up into their teams. They all went out. We had 12 groups, ages 1 to 80 plus. Many couples, several families, a Girl Scout troop. There were people with strollers, people in wheelchairs, people who had mobility and visual impairments, residents from throughout the city. We had representatives come in from Pine Island. There's an age-friendly Pine Island network member there, and they were interested in learning about the walk audit. And these groups spent about an hour walking their routes of roughly a mile. They made observations, guided observations based upon materials supplied by AARP. They discussed amongst themselves what they were seeing. They came to a general agreement as to the walkability of their walk. And then We Bike Rochester sponsored a kind of a post-audit event at a nearby facility. And that was attended by around 50 of the participants. And basically they didn't just come in and get their ice cream and leave. They came in and they talked about the audit. We found it was a very engaging experience for the participants, many of them expressing interest in doing more of these, and we'll, in the next couple of weeks, be reporting out what they shared. I do want to mention, Matt referenced this, but Ian Thomas, who joined us on the walk, who is the state and local program director for America Walks, which is a national organization around active transportation. And the man's been to a lot of walk audits, and he said that was the largest group of walk audits he'd ever seen. That wasn't our intent. It wasn't our plan. We didn't know any better. But we did have a large group. It's not the usual way in which walk audits are done, but allowed us to canvass a whole neighborhood in a single day, and it actually went off pretty well. The weather was nice, and there weren't what problems there were minor and could be corrected, so we count the event as a great success. So what's next? These are all possibilities that have come up in conversation. We know that there are two neighborhoods who have expressed an interest in doing walk audits in their neighborhoods. In fact, both of them participated in our walk audits, in the Slattery Park walk audit, as a way to find out more about it. There's one new neighborhood association that's thinking about forming, and they're thinking about using the walk audit as a way to bring that neighborhood together. It's kind of a launching event. There's been some conversation with DMC about doing a walk audits connected to the BRT transit stops and looking at the walk sheds around those, and that might happen in the spring. As Matt mentioned, the walk audits being now used in conjunction with the sidewalk improvement districts as another way of community engagement. It is kind of a bottom-up data that complements very well the top-down data that we get. And finally, you may be familiar, I'm not quite sure, about the Safe Routes to School initiative. It's kind of a national program. It's active here in the city. And some participants in that initiative have used walk audits as part of their process, and we're looking at using walk audits. There's going to be some conversation about adding those walk audits to the Safe Routes to School that goes on. Also, just a few days ago, ARP published a new workbook on bike audits that can be used in conjunction with the walk audits, and we got great support from We Bike Rochester. I was embarrassed that I hadn't invited the men up front, but I thought, well, bikes, what do I know? We're talking about walking. Well, guess what? They're interested in walking too. So they were a great partner as we put this together, and I'm happy to see that we now have a bike audit worksheets that we could begin to use in conjunction with that. Also, I want to say, and this is connected to walk audits, we are working now with the Park District on looking at age-friendly parks, and we've got our first project that we're starting that's at the Rolling Green Park, right? Rolling Green Park out there by Madonna Towers in the neighborhood out there, and it's going to be kind of a pilot for that, and we're very excited about the cooperation we're getting from the Park District and them including this in their engagement process. So I want to thank the city again for its support. A few days after the event, we were invited to present at the National ARP Network of Age-Friendly States and Communities in a webinar on pedestrian safety and walk audits in November, and we'll be sharing our work at that national webinar, and I'll be sharing the contribution that the city has made. I'll share with you now that as I've talked to colleagues around the nation about the work they're doing, not all cities are as receptive, friendly, and supportive to this work. And in fact, some people are surprised that we're not having to wave the walk audit in people's faces and say we need our sidewalks fixed. We're now we hope to be part of the process that the city's already taken on to improve sidewalks and make sure that they're safe. So when we have compiled the data, and we'll share that with the city staff, and I'm sure they'll pass it along to you as well, and we'll probably make it available and distribute it widely. So thanks again, and that's all I have.
Wow, I'm impressed. Thank you. That was just a really great thing, and as expected from FSR. So yep. Wonderful. I've got one question so far from Ms. Dennis. I know we are over time, but I want to give questions to Mr. Beal or Matt C. as necessary. So does anybody else but Ms. Dennis have a question? Hey.
That's actually what I was going to say. I have a lot of questions, but I will bring them to you on another. But I just want to say thank you. This helps us so much. Mental health, accessibility, so many facets that are needed in our world. So thank you for your work and the work of all your team.
Thank you.
This is wonderful.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. City Administrator Zelms, what do you have for us?
Just wanted to point out that your next study session on the 23rd, we have bus rapid transit update, and then the following Monday is the 5th Monday, and so there are not a study session or a city council meeting on the 30th of October.
Thank you so much. We will see you all back here at 7 p.m.